A Look Under the Shell is an Everlook Broadcasting Company production. Welcome to another episode of A Look Under the Shell. I'm Dan. I am your arbiter, we'll say, your manager of the broadcast for today. I don't have anything pertinent to say. All the guests do, which is why we're going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves here, starting with the community manager, the myth, the legend, Akalix. Go ahead. Let everyone know who you are, Akalix.
Hello, everyone. Once again, I am Akalix. I am Turtle Wow's English community manager, head of PR marketing, this, that, and the other, and professional leaker yapper.
Did you say leaker yapper?
Yep, leaker and yapper.
That needs to be your role on Discord now.
Both of those.
We also have, as per usual, Vrograg Fishslayer, the orc reporter himself. Vrograg, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. It's your friendly neighborhood reporter orc, Vrograg. Happy to join you once again, Dan. We're having a great time. It's the summer season. Fire Festival's going on around the server. I'm hot. Everyone's having a great time, though.
It's a little toasty. It's just a touch toasty right now, and or muggy, depending upon where you are. Also, quick claps in chat for Vrograg. You have been getting your news on. Not just on YouTube, but on the radio now, too. People can hear you regularly every single week doing your different segments.
That's right. We've been able to partially transition in an attempt to prevent my own burnout. I've just been doing radio broadcasts that I've been putting out on Everlook Radio. I hope everyone's been enjoying those. And of course, if you don't catch them and just want some background audio, the archives are available on my normal YouTube channel as well.
There you go. And this has been less stressful for you. Instead of doing like full video, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the process of recording, editing, producing, all that stuff, it's very time intensive. I like being able to take more time to spend with the community, getting involved in some of the other side projects I do. So I haven't stopped doing the news. I've just been publishing it in a different way.
Just a slightly different location, but still just as much, if not more news, all things considered.
Yeah, the radio does allow me a wider net to cast, and I'm allowed to play around with lesser known topics and communities that don't get as much attention. So yeah, that's nice.
And finally, after a few episodes of it just being the three of us, we do have a wonderful, upstanding community guest. Ducky, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Ducky. I've been on this wonderful server for just over 2 years now, and I am the current Guildmaster, main tank, and raid lead of the Doom Turtles Raiding Coalition. A coalition that was formed initially just amongst friends to clear Naxxramas, back when none of the guilds involved had enough players to do it on their own, and now we excel at speedrunning and trying to push the envelope on that, which is a lot of fun.
Now, I do want to ask a little bit about Doom Turtles because I don't know a ton myself. Is Doom Turtles a full clear currently? Have you guys downed every single boss?
Yes, of course. We've been full clearing Naxxramas every week for about 20 months, I want to say now. I don't think we've missed a week.
So you're keeping the streak alive.
Oh, yeah.
It's
kind of how to describe it? It's like the original version of Doom Turtles, which had formed before I joined the server, came together to clear Naxxramas, and they did, I think, 2 or 3 clears, and then a lot of people sort of quit because there was an awful lot of... It's stressful, it's difficult to do it the first time around, and for a lot of people, that was the goal, and they felt like they beat the game. So when we started rebuilding, especially when I started Raid League and stuff, I spent under Ballbear's leadership at the time. The push was not just to clear Nax, but to sort of improve every time, get better every time, so that there was a secondary goal after we beat the game to get better at beating the game, if you follow. this game is kind of just about progression. You need that sense of progression, and we wanted to focus on that.
Oh, absolutely. There's a reason that from time immemorial, going all the way back to Nostalrius, every time a new server pops up, people clamor to it very quickly just for the fresh, almost like the fresh new smell of the server, and then they go back to where they were doing because they got the progression out of their system.
Yeah, exactly.
And one more question for you. I don't want to harp on you too much because I want to get to the topics, but I do have to ask, being the GM for Doom Turtles and now being on a 20-month streak of getting those clears done, what do you feel the secret to the sauce is almost? What is your folks' way of keeping things together as you have?
100% community. It's all about morale. It's all about people you want to play with, people you want to come back next week and play with next week. A big thing I've seen in a lot of, shall we say, sweaty guilds, so to speak, is people will immediately pile on mistakes, discuss mistakes, blame people for mistakes, get kind of toxic. We very much want to avoid that. It's not that we don't have criticism or discussion like that, but it's always, let's look at ways to do better, but don't pick out specific players and blame them, because you want people to want to come back. You want people to want to play with you. And if you have people that want to play with you, they also will hang around when they have all their gear. Our big speed runs, especially the sub 90-minute run we did in Nax, basically came down to having like 30-something players in perfect base that knew the raid inside out. And it takes time to build that kind of a thing up, and you don't build that up without having people who want to be there. So that's 100% the key.
It sounds like, as you're describing it, those really long-standing raid guilds, a lot of these different, almost like planks or pieces of the structure, lean on each other, where you need that longevity to build the roster, but then you need the roster that wants to raid together to build the longevity.
Yeah, they go hand in hand.
A little Raiders out there, a little bit of wisdom from her, a little bit of wisdom from Ducky. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Okay.
Cheers.
Alrighty. So today the topic is, as we're starting to look at, and I'm not saying it's coming anytime exactly soon. I'm not promising a release date, because if I do, Akalix is going to be like, Dan, you stop. But 117.2 is on the way. It's going to be happening sometime.
It's getting close.
Hopefully, yes. And that means we're going to see a bit of a dynamic shift in where the rating itself is on Turtle WoW. We have where it currently is, where Nax is kind of at the pinnacle of it, and you have other content that actively supports people getting into it. But that's going to change with 3.5 happening. Before we get into the full length and breadth discussion, Akalix, if you could just explain to us what Karazhan 40 is going to add to the server, just in very bare bone details.
So Karazhan 40 is going to be similar to how AQ20 and ZG, that type of raid, has a 0.5 set. Karazhan 40 is going to be that, but past Nax. So this will be adding content that is more difficult than Naxxramas to clear. And while it is not going to be a full tier 4, because that is coming in Grim Batol later, what we are adding in Upper Karazhan is a higher level of harder content after Nax, because it's something where I know that everyone here who raids can attest to this, especially Ducky and myself, because we both raid in higher end guilds where the game itself isn't, you're not going to be mechanically challenged by World of Warcraft vanilla to the point of it being difficult to clear things after you know what to do. It's very much a fundamental, once you know what you're doing, it's not too hard. Getting into Naxxramas and finishing Nax and gearing through there, after you have the initial gearing done from Naxxramas, it doesn't. You're just walking on the treadmill at that point, and you can always grind your times lower, and that's what a lot of top guilds are trying to do right now. Guilds like Hard Knock Society, Doom Turtles, Mortality, Thunderdale Brewing Co. are all trying to sort of compete for the really top of the line times there. Guilds like Emerald Dream are pushing up towards them as well. But overall, that is just a matter of who can get geared and who can execute. And there's not really this is an extremely mechanically challenging boss fight. Like, the extent of that is probably the hardest mechanical fight is, I don't know, doing the dance.
I was about to. So as you were saying, after you like learn the mechanics, there's not a lot of learning to do. I was going to say, as soon as you learn how to do the safety dance, there's not like another safety dance or another that level of mechanic. Not to say safety dance is the pinnacle of mechanic. There are other bosses in Nax that certainly offer other things, but I think we all know safety dance.
I was going to add as well, the fun thing about the safety dance is once your raid is in it a few times, you can outgear and skip it, so it suddenly stops being a thing.
Okay,
Which
so
is
I have never done Nax at that level. I've always had to do the safety dance when I ran it back in the day. For Turtle WoW overgearing it, do you just crowd the platform?
No, you can bring a standard comp. If anything, more warriors, and you call for wreck.
Oh, I always approve that. I always approve more warriors. My favorite Molten Core
Yeah,
raid
that-
is 38 warriors and 2 healers.
To be clear, you still, to my knowledge at least, you still do the first phase of running. It's just not the entire party has to. Casters don't end up having to do a dance phase.
Oh, that's gotta
You
be wonderful.
Yeah.
You just can't flat out ignore it, or else your casters just won't have mana.
I mean, who needs mana when you have warriors?
Exactly, just red mana.
Well, it's a mana burn, so you really can't take that damage or some of the mana that those casters at that level would have.
Listen,
Yeah,
we-
it stings.
Listen, we need to be trash cans, not trash cans here, Vrograg. Come on.
All right.
Oh, believe me, if I've learned anything from raiding, it is that trash definitely can.
That's good.
Never in my life have I raided with a guild who will set a record in 1 week and then proceed to do just the most horrendous clear on a different raid the same night.
The amount of times.
Been there.
What's that, Ducky?
I've been there.
I think we could all raise our hands and say, you know what, that last bit of AQ40 trash has its own moods, and we cannot predict those moods.
I mean, I don't know if I assume Ducky has the same strategies in Doom Turtles that we use in Mortality, but the moods that we typically use for those are skip.
Yep. Always skip.
Fair enough.
I ain't engaged
We
with that.
don't do any of it.
Meanwhile, there's just honest, red-blooded, normal raiders that will engage with the mechanics. None of this cheaty nonsense just to satisfy your own egos. I can't believe it personally.
High and mighty Orc Vrograg over there. My goodness, how's the shaman lifestyle coming? By the way,
Shaman's doing great. In a vacuum where like if possibly a mage, like 5 mages don't show up, my elemental shaman I did actually get top DPS on Patchwork recently.
oh,
Almost breaking
congratulations!
1k DPS, yeah. But it literally requires like the perfect pinnacle bisque gear and then a little slice of RNG to get there.
As long as the wind is blowing the exact correct direction that day.
Yeah, exactly. A little extra mana couldn't hurt if I get a Shadow Priest group or.
One day I'll actually hop back on my Shadow Priest and raid on her. One day I might. Back to the topic at hand though, and talking about raiding on Turtle as a whole. I think the first thing that we need to talk about more than anything else is the fact that on Turtle we have already these wonderful custom raids. A few, and I do mean a few, groups in the private vanilla community have tried their hand at custom raids, but Turtle really was the one who knocked it out of the park first. So really quick, Akalix, I am going to ask you to be the academic on the side and tell us about what custom raids are currently already on Turtle.
So currently on Turtle, we have our two big custom raids, those being Emerald Sanctum, which is a raid based in the Emerald Dream, accessible via Hyjal, and Lower Karazhan Halls, which is, you can probably guess where it's accessible from, Karazhan. And that one is a smaller, more entry level, think around the level of Ubers, instance, which is a 10-man, very quick and easy to run through. But it's been one that has been very well received by the community. I think that one, more so than Emerald Sanctum. Emerald Sanctum has been overall positive, but some people have complaints because, it does take a little bit more time to clear than you would want for just a loot pinata similar to an Onyxia, where you do have to still put in like 10-15 minutes of clearing trash first, which some people don't like that, some people do. It's something where we've changed up a little bit over time, but the main idea is, with both of them, adding an extra direction that people can go for raids.
I know I will say when I was still raiding, I did not mind the trash in Emerald Sanctum at all. Not only are there some pretty decent drops off of those, but if you're a skinner, you could actually make bank off of those mobs.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people have mixed opinions on the amount of trash in Emerald Sanctum, but I think that it is better to compare Emerald Sanctum to a shortened AQ20 than it is in Onyxia's lair. Because a lot of people will compare it to Onyxia, where, there's 2-3 groups of like 2 trash mobs at a time that you have to kill before the boss. But first of all, who's to say that Onyxia is going to stay like that forever? And second of all, it's not exactly at that same level. We like to have it be a little bit more of an actual instance rather than just a. Onyxia is almost an instanced world boss, honestly, which we don't want to do a ton of loot pinata bosses like that. We want, if you're organizing a raid, it should actually be a raid, not just a walk in, slap it, and leave.
Sure. Ducky, I know you wanted to add something really quick before we go to you, though. Akalix, would you say that Turtle's perspective or opinion, and maybe you don't want to say this outright or not, but would you say you want to make sure raids are working for it a little bit?
Raids should not be just a loot pinata. And obviously, as we're going to get to later in the program, raids can kind of become a loot pinata, especially when you have multiple speedrunning guilds trying to push for the fastest time possible in them and completing multiple raids within less than an hour. But overall, the goal is for raids to not just be a complete pushover, and for it to be, okay, you actually have to, you have to put in some effort. You have to have 20, 40 mostly conscious people at their computers ready to hit something, because that is how it feels at its best in raiding, is when it feels like you are one of this big group of people, this small army that's going to assault this dangerous foe, and everybody's doing their part and everybody's impacting it and everybody is needed to be there so that you can take down this very strong foe. That is how raiding feels at its absolute best.
That's kind of how AQ40 has always felt for me. But I'm sorry, Ducky, you wanted to comment there, I think.
I want to echo some stuff like this. I 100% agree. When you get the raid going and everyone feels like they're executing, that is absolutely where you want the game to be. I just wanted to chime in on some of the criticism I have heard around Emerald Sanctum, because I don't think the trash is the problem, and I didn't mind even when there was a lot more trash before it was reduced a little bit. It's a lot of people feel the trash is samey. It's got a lot of health. It just feels spongy, and you're not doing much. Which, okay, I get isn't very interesting. It feels a lot more satisfying when you're doing trash, when it's some of the trash like it is in Naxxramas, where they have their own little mechanics. Think like the Ferlina trash, where you need to pick out the acolytes and stop them from spamming Shadow Ball volleys, or kill ghouls in the right order so they don't one-shot your tanks, things like that. So mechanics like that are always great. I think the other thing with Emerald Sanctum is it's not a long enough raid to not feel like a loop pinata. So it almost always gets tacked on to the end of another raid for most guilds, which is where I think a lot of the ill feelings around it taking too long come from. So it's just one of those weird balancing things. Is like if you want it to feel like a proper raid, it needs to be longer, but then people are going to complain it's longer because it's one boss. It's like I don't even know where you want to go with that, but it's just those are the sentiments I've been hearing. So I said I'd echo those.
That's fair. That's fair. Vrograg, what are your thoughts on where, especially the custom content for Turtle is right now? Where are you on with that?
Well, custom content is great. It's been made with a lot of love. That's very, very much evident. We didn't touch on Lower Karazhan much, but for those that don't know, Lower Karazhan feels very much like a advanced Uber's run. Little bit more difficult. Would take a little bit longer, I would say, and does have some catch-up style gear. It's also a 10-man, and some of the gear is somewhere between tier 1 and tier 2 as far as quote unquote gear level. As far as Emerald Sanctum, I would probably say much my same observations. Definitely made with love, definitely made with a lot of care. It wasn't brought up, but probably the largest complaint that I've heard from the community is a lack of scaling, and that's mostly because I would assume every other non-custom raid does scale. There's even some dungeons that allow 10 people in, which is even more bizarre. But aside from that, people who maybe only have 20, 25 people, for them to do the hard mode, even if they are geared enough, it's pretty difficult because the HP amounts are definitely 40-man worthy. So, but I've also heard back from the team about that too. So, I mean, Akalix, if you want to speak about that, you can, but I understand where the team's coming. It's their custom content. So,
So, our current plan is after this patch update, going into 1.17.2, we are going to be moving Emerald Sanctum into being scalable.
Ooh.
Our plans with that are that anytime that it is current content, which in this case means that it is current content means one of two things. It's either currently in this patch was released or currently is the highest level content. We are not going to have current content scale because we want to really encourage people to experience it as it was designed and intended to be. Similar to why we keep requiring Nax to have so many people in it, as scales down to 35, I believe. Is because A, it's meant to be a challenge, and B, it's meant to be experienced as it was designed. So in future patches, Emerald Sanctum will be able to scale down some, and that'll be generally able to make it more accessible to more people. But as of currently, it is not scaled because it is meant to be. It's current content. It's new. Go do the new thing. Go gather your militia and go beat up that dragon.
So just to be clear, what you're saying is when Karazhan 40 comes out, it will not be scalable. It'll just be a 40-man, correct?
It will just be a 40-man.
Okay.
I believe, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
At most, it would scale down to 35.
Go ahead, Ducky.
I was gonna say I just love that idea a lot. That's just great.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of transitioning to the next topic here, kind of in order. There is a lot that makes rating in general on Turtle very unique. Obviously, with the custom content, that's a big part of it, but there are many other things that kind of enter into it. The community and how the economy is put together, some of the biggest parts notwithstanding. I would love for us to touch a moment on about how cooldowns and consumables enter into the system. I know, Vrograg, you actually brought that up as we were talking about what topics to touch on. And you being the economy orc as well, how does the economy and some consumables, most consumables lasting through death, alter or change the rating environment based on what vanilla might have been normally.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty complex topic. It could literally be its own seminar. I'll do a lot of data research on this. I do a lot of scraping databases to find the numbers, find the data, and largely vanilla servers at their core aren't designed for the amount of raiders and as progressed as they are raiders for one server. So part of the growing pains it seems like the Turtle team has sort of adjusted is changing how consumables are generated, both through recipes as well as materials needed. It's not different than most vanilla raids. You still want to consume your butt off in order to do most of the content. So as a olive branch to the community, when many materials got scarce, many of those materials are more easily achievable, almost like you can get them. There's alternate ways, and it's less taxing now. So I would say by and large it's very similar, but the ease of access and the amount of grinding necessary in order to do raiding content is much less restrictive and much less onerous.
I'll add on. We have over the past couple of months, we've put out a couple updates regarding PvP and economy, and specifically the economy-related ones have all sort of contributed to this same goal of making it a lot more manageable for the average player to get the consumes that they want for the content they want to consume on, without it being a massive burden on them. Because even if you can argue, well, you don't need to consume to go to raid, you still might be required to by your group. And even if you then don't and you aren't required to by your group, then you're just going to be doing less damage than someone who does. So overall, people are going to be incentivized to consume, and that's not something that's going to change. And overall, it's fun to do big number damage fun. That's basic human monkey brain behavior, where me like big shiny number, so me want to do big shiny number.
Also, I would say, especially for those people who feel like, oh, I don't need to consume. Well, everyone around you is trying to do their best. It's a common courtesy. It's a, okay, you've invited me to this event to participate. I should have the courtesy of participating to the best of my abilities. Even if I'm going to be number one no matter what, I should be putting the same effort in that everyone else is. Ducky, obviously, you have a lot to deal with when it comes to being a GM for a major raiding guild. As a guild leader, how do you approach making sure people are putting that effort in, are contributing to a certain amount, but also not having that super sweat mentality that you were talking about, trying to stay a little bit away from earlier?
So our general guild policy is organized casual. We are a casual guild, but we are exceptionally well organized with the raids. And generally speaking, it has not been difficult to get people to consume. After all, the game is about the sense of progression. Everything you do, leveling, getting gear, etc., makes numbers bigger. So if you're not doing everything to make number bigger, why are you here? You know, it's sort of the point of it. I will say the changes around consumes basically didn't affect us. Our entire focus had always been on execution. We just love a well-executed raid. It's just when it's fun, so to speak, and vast majority of it on the same page as a result. So when the consumes change happened, we kind of were still using the same amount of consumes every night. But I do like it overall for the server, as it did help an awful lot with prices. It took an awful lot of pressure off from people having to grind every week, and it made the barrier for entry for a lot of lower tier guilds way nicer. It also means when those lower tier guilds are trying to convince everyone to consume, they have a much easier job, which is good.
That makes
So,
a lot of
absolutely
sense.
different.
And I can imagine, especially when it comes to Naxxramas itself, The barrier to entry is already pretty high. There's a lot of gear requirements. There's a lot of knowledge requirements that go into it. I really can't speak too much of experience on that front on my end, but I can only imagine that it can be stressful trying to get someone up to that point, especially if they just hit 60, they're starting to learn raiding. Okay, they've joined a guild. The guild wants them up in Naxxramas, and suddenly they have this cliff right in front of their face.
Yeah, which can be a big deal, especially when it's like execution fights. I would argue the most technical fight for most new groups to get over is Four Horsemen, because that's the first fight in the game that actually requires the entire raid to know what they're doing. Everyone has an assignment, and they do have to follow it. And if you're burning through consumes on that fight, and you kind of do, more grain hits really hard, Thane is hard to kill fast enough, stuff like that, it can be morale destroying. So this really helps there. I will say, though, for myself and for a lot of the leaders in Doom Turtles, we personally don't like the change. We don't like how it feels. I like mechanics that reward execution, and losing your consumes when you die is a punishment for making a mistake. But I was also one of those weirdos that really, really, really loved world buffs, and I missed them because I felt they rewarded execution as well. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. I get that that's not popular.
You might be a touch sweaty.
Yeah, sorry.
So I can actually touch on that a little bit, where I personally enjoy losing consumes on death, as well as just a sort of you have to play well to get that reward. Same with world buffs, because I raided in a very sweaty guild at one point in Blizzard Classic, where it was to the point where there was 1 week that we went for Black Fathom Death's buff. Most people don't even think that.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a buff at the end of the Black Fathom Depths instance, or Black Fathom Deeps, and it gives +5 int, +5 spirit, and plus 10 frost resist. And every caster went for that buff 1 week.
And isn't it halfway through as well?
It's at the very end of the instance, I believe.
Yeah, you can walk through to get it, but I think the buff's only half an hour or an hour.
Yeah, I think it's an hour, but that's the level of schizo cooking that was getting done by that group. So I can very much appreciate some very dedicated, sweaty gameplay. But the main problem is that Turtle WoW is overall a very casual friendly server. Our average player is fairly old and pretty casual WoW enjoyer. Obviously, there are the outliers in that. There are people in guilds like Doom Turtles, Mortality, Hard Knocks, Thunderail, Brewing Co., who all very much enjoy trying to push the limits and trying to really see what they can do. But the average player is more akin to just, even if they're clearing Nax, it's either barely a 1 day thing or it's a 2 day thing, and it's, not super fast. It's going to take a couple hours, and it's going to be, it's going to be a little. And the main problem is for those guilds, and especially for guilds that are progressing, that is when the consumes are brutal. And I watched as multiple progression guilds fell apart because of consume costs. Because I remember specifically watching on a GM character, I was spying on some raids before this change to see just how bad it was for progression. And I watched a guild wipe 10 times in a row on patchwork. And I did the math, and I watched their tanks spend over 1,000 gold that night. And I just sat there and I was like, okay, this might be a problem.
Yeah,
this might be a bit of a problem.
Another thing that maybe the more tryhard players, obviously, they have fun in their own way, but a lot of people also engage with the content in a much more, a social, casual, laid back way where, they're not looking at the timer on their flask going, hey guys, we got to keep going. It's more like catching up, goofing around, talking to each other. And, those changes help facilitate those groups to continue meeting and continue enjoying the game. And, maybe Akalix could touch on this, but I could also imagine a world where trying to design new raid content with world buffs in mind would also be nightmarish.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think, and not to do a bit of a callback, but Ducky, what you were talking about earlier, when it came to using community to really build that long-term success for a raid group. It's not the amount of consumables someone brings; it's the attitude they bring. It's wanting to work with people in the long term, and it's while it is important to have some level of difficulty and resistance to success, because otherwise you walk in, you get free loot, there's no challenge, and you get bored. But certainly you need to make sure you empower the group as community to continue to want to come together. If that sounds like what you were talking about earlier, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Well, the thing is, as well, we're gonna find our own challenge. It's not. I'm gonna be honest. Nothing in this game is particularly hard. It's literally just a time investment. It's not mechanically difficult. It's not objectively difficult gameplay or anything like that. But we find our own challenge by just trying to go faster, trying to optimize execution. Okay, consumes don't get lost in death. We don't have World Buster anymore, but we still find ways to min max. We have our warrior pumpers that just love to challenge each other and see who can go to the top. It's always good natured competition as well, like pats in the back and so on. So that camaraderie goes a long way. You really do want everyone to like each other. So yeah, it is very much on that. With regard to balancing, I personally love good execution fights. I think the Four Horsemen fight is the best designed fight in the game. And I would love to see more stuff like that. But I can also see that getting to some guilds, right? It's a bottleneck for some guilds. But it's fun to have like execution stuff. Like other stuff, patchwork, as mentioned, it's not really execution heavy. It's more of a gear check and consume check. And when consumes are getting burned through, like mentioned, that is soul crushing. Like that destroys the morale of a guild so fast. It just makes people not want to log on again. It's like, say I'm done. But also, and beyond that, it makes people quit the server. You also want to avoid that.
That's very fair. Vrograg, any final thoughts on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, patchwork used to be.
Oh boy, here we go.
Patchwork used to be a technical challenge for rogue tanks, but then they took it from us.
Oh
But
Lord,
I have been on that soapbox for a long time, and I completely understand why they took it away. But it was a different fight, and in that vein, the one thing I will add, less joking, is that part of the challenge is that you'll have community efforts like just this last weekend. Last week there was an all druid MC. There's a lot of players that go ahead and play what are more considered meme specs to start exploring the meta of different things. Some of that Turtle is made available through some class changes, and there's more class changes soon to come. So I think there's going to be a lot of room for, even in spaces where, hey, this isn't, mechanically the most difficult fight, but hey, I'm trying this new build and I want to see how it works out. So I think there's going to be room in the future for even more exploration in that way as well.
anything to push against cookie cutters is always a good thing, in my opinion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, sort of to use that to segue into a different topic, we are the overall design by the team on Turtle is it's being balanced between two very different directions right now, and we're trying to do both at the same time. Those two directions being designed for more casual raiding and designed to give more challenge to people who have done Naxxramas for 20 years now, and they kind of want to hit something that takes a little bit more. So overall, if you look at our roadmap, you can see that currently on our roadmap we have Grimbatol and Karazhan 40 at tiers 4 and tiers 3.5 respectively, where these are going to be future challenges to really expand that endgame content a little bit further. However, we've also said, and I will repeat here, we do not plan on adding tier 5 until at least like late 2025 into 2026 range. Tier 5 and stuff like that is getting extremely deep into progression, and that means that's going to be very limited on who can do it. Grimba Toll is already being designed to very much be limited on who can do it. I will be completely honest and transparent here in saying there are going to be a lot of guilds that clear Nax that cannot clear Karazhan 40 in Grimba Toll, especially Grimba Toll. We do not want Tier 4 to be a show up, get your loot pinata, and go home to show off the cool new private server stuff. We want it to genuinely be a challenge for players and provide this sort of same sense that originally Clearing Nax did of pride and of we did something special here. This was impressive. This is I get to be sitting in town in my tier 4 set and I get to look cool. Because there's always the classic idea of like when a server is younger in its lifespan, you see somebody who has a Thunder Fury or a Sulfuras or an Atiesh or stuff like that, and it's like, wow, that's the guy. That's them. They did the cool thing. And same with even now, currently on Nordinar, that's what a Scarab Lord is like. Because there are so few of them that still actively play because there are so few that played back then. And I'm sure now that that's going to be what Scarab Lords are like on Telebeam because they just recently, as of a couple days ago when we're recording this, just finished up the war effort. And there's going to be a handful of Scarab Lords, but that's not a majority of players. They're going to be special looking. And we want that to be preserved with Tier 4, where, ooh, is that the Tier 4 set? Oh, that looks so cool. Oh, they did the cool oh, cool. That must mean that they're really endgame raider. Cool. It's meant to be unique, and there's going to be a lot of special drops in these raids where, you know, they're going to look unique and cool and interesting, and it's going to be like, oh, wow, okay, that's the custom thing.
Well,
we don't want that to just be everyone gets that.
Since Akalix was willing to talk about Tier 5, Vrograg, just so you know, I took a peek inside the super secret sacred areas, and I'd like to tell you right now, in Tier 5, rogues will be the best tanks.
I'll believe it when I see it.
No.
And everyone.
I mean that'd be great, but I don't think I'll be getting it.
Everyone had the collective, why are you saying this? All right, we need to take a time out. Short break. We're going to come back for our second segment. We're going to talk about not just speedrunning current content, but what content and the raiding environment on Turtle might look like when it comes to when those new tiers of content are released. More A Look Under the Shell coming up right after this. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting with the in-game radio widget. Welcome back to A Look Under the Shell with myself, Dan, and with me here, Akalix, Ducky, and Vrograg. We're so happy to have you here with us. Now, in our previous segment, Akalix mentioned briefly the environment of speedrunning raids on Turtle WoW. Now is a great time. Let's open that up. What is speedrunning raids on Turtle?
So, honestly, you can go. Oh, okay. The general environment of speedrunning on Turtle WoW it's recently sort of developed into a scene where a player Vida made a unofficial leaderboard for Turtle WoW speedruns. People could upload their logs and VODs, and their guilds and coalitions and everything like that could contribute and say, hey, look, this is what we did. This is how fast we did it. And they have various scales of verification where some are VOD verified, some are just log verified, and others are fully unverified, but that's before they were saying that it needed verification. And there have been numerous guilds that have started getting a little bit more competitive with it. For instance, the Molten Core category has a good number of guilds that are all within decently competitive times of each other. The main contenders in speedrunning on Turtle WoW right now are Mortality, Doom Turtles, and Hard Knock Society. With Mortality and Doom Turtles being the two guilds that have been consistently contending each other for Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, and Encourage. And then those two, in addition to Hard Knock Society, Thunder Elber & Co., and the Emerald Dream, contending in the Nax Ramus category, where ironically, in every category besides Naxxramas, it's Mortality and Doom Turtles fighting each other out for the top. And in Naxxramas, neither of them are at the top, with Hard Knock Society dropping an absolute bomb of an hour and 25-minute run.
An hour and 25
Great
minutes
run,
to
to be
clear
fair.
all of Nax.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. He
Goodness.
beat us by 3 minutes. It was impressive.
Just a very small anecdote I will share.
Mhm.
With how competitive it's been getting, it's been very fun to watch every week, seeing as guilds will get very close times to each other. With Encourage, for example, going back and forth between Mortality, Doom Turtles a good couple times. There was a week recently where Mortality was in second place still, and Doom Turtles had the number one time, and Mortality got 8 seconds off of the 8 seconds behind the first place at that time. And that was just an absolutely painful run to be a part of, because it's so close yet so far.
Mm-hmm.
And people were talking all about it and how can we do this better, how can this be done better. And that's this super exciting part about this environment that's been curated on Turtle, where it's a handful of guilds that are all playing well and trying to push to be number one, because they want to make, they want to be the number one. And that's meaning that everyone is pushing each other to improve. And it's sort of similar to how Ducky mentioned earlier, with internally the sort of idea of motivating each other with friendly competition. It's very much similar to that, but on a much larger scale between these groups in the various raids, seeing, okay, they just took a minute off of our time. What can we do to improve?
Ducky, what were you going to add to that? What were you going to say?
No, I like some stuff. The getting within a few seconds and losing out is heartbreaking. I remember our first attempt at a Molten Core speed run. We had someone ninja pull on the way to the start position.
No.
So we ended up missing out on the top time by 10 seconds. And for people who don't know, the way speed runs are recorded, it's from engaging the first mob to killing the last boss. That's the time frame. That's how we measure it. So starting with the wrong mob or starting early before everyone's in position, that's easily like about a minute lost, and we lose up by 10 seconds. It's so frustrating. But we know better. We did better the next time. The other thing is, like, for Doom Turtles at least, our interest in speedrun was kind of just around Naxxramas. That was all we were pushing for. The other raids were kind of seen as secondary. We would go there to evaluate new players, to gear up new players, to get things like Blackwing Lair trinkets or the odd Katoon piece for the established players, or finish off someone's Thunder Fury, that kind of thing. But they weren't seen as core raids that we were looking to do, or raids we took seriously until this leaderboard came along. We had some good times set before that, when just before Christmas we said let's all YOLO with our mains into those 3 raids and see what we can do, and just casually beat our previous time by 20 something minutes or something. But that was more just, hey, let's see what we can do for fun. But the existing leaderboard is really what's pushing this, because before that we were kind of just measuring against ourselves. Like, we are doing this, let's go a bit faster. Like, the initial push was, can we get it under 2 hours so we can do all of Nax on one flask kind of thing? We're cheap kids. But yeah, this leaderboard really has stepped things up, and it's just a lot of fun. Especially, it's worth mentioning that there's a lot of players that play in multiple guilds. Like, there's plenty of people in Doom Turtle play with Mortality or play with Hard Knocks, and vice versa. A lot of us, there is a lot of talk between us. We do all get on with each other, so that's also fun.
And really quickly, a huge shout out to everyone who contributes and participates in those leaderboards, not just the individual who made them. Akalix, remind me of that person's name, please.
Vida.
Vida, thank you. I'm just horrible with names. I apologize. But to everyone who participates in good faith with them and respects them and uses them as not just a learning tool, but also something that is entertaining for the community. The fact that they have grown the way they have, everyone deserves a pat on the back. for that. That's huge. Vrograg, before we get onto other topics, when it comes to speedrunning, you're someone that has kind of introduced me to the coverage of it on the server. How have you felt about the speedrunning environment so far for Turtle?
Early on in my days doing news, every now and then I would see a guild boast about some kind of time record. I had a lot of pots on the oven, so to say, but occasionally I would go through and verify that, hey, they actually did this time, and I thought that was really cool. But then out of nowhere, Vita just came up and said, hey, like I'll run an archive, I'll keep track of this. And that's fantastic, because I usually believe that the best parts of the community are always going to be community-led efforts. And Vita's part of the community. And this is a perfect example of someone going out of their way to do something extra for the rest of the community and everyone else benefiting. So, like, it's been great to watch this. And I got to tell you, I know when someone makes a new record because I will get pinged. It happens just about every time. And I'm really happy that people can find a sense of accomplishment, even with some of these raids that in some cases they've been clearing for years. I think that's awesome.
That is. I know I said we were going to move on there, but I do actually have one question. Ducky, you were talking about kind of the structure of the speed run overall there, where the start point to the end point. I personally, I've actually followed some speed running pretty actively. There are some Mario speedruns where I love seeing the new strats and updates. Has speedrunning raids on Turtle gotten to the point where there are splits for certain segments? So, for my example from Core, the opening to Lucy, let's say, is that in its own split? Do you guys measure that yet, or is that it hasn't not really progressed there yet?
I would say yes and no. We don't officially do it, like it's not noticed in the VODs or anything like that, but it's very common for me to like call it out because I have a stopwatch going and I'm watching the time and that kind of thing.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
call out, that's 14 minutes makes it down kind of thing. It's like, okay, good skip. We did it, got a good skip on the trash. And it's more like you're keeping, when you're a raid lead, how long have I been? I've been raid leading Nax for 21, 22 months now, something like that. Yeah, the things you say, the stuff you're doing and so on, it's pretty much muscle memory. You're just you're constantly reminding people of stupid things like watch the cleave, make sure you focus the acolytes, don't cleave the ghouls, stuff like that. And what you find is no matter how many times you say it, if you ever forget to say it once, someone will mess it up. So you kind of just get into autopilot, always saying it. And that also tends to mark out the timings of when you're checking the clock and so on as well. At some stage, it just becomes so practiced, which is kind of fun. I did want to mention one small anecdote that I remember there is our when we did our 128th run there of Naxxramas about a month ago, a bit over a month ago now, we had a new warrior with us in Ata, and he'd never done Naxxramas before. So we kind of joked that everything he saw was a bit of a blur. So fun first time.
It moves that fast for a player that hasn't seen it for a while or has never seen it before.
He'd never seen it before. His first time playing Classic.
That's wonderful. That's actually kind of heartwarming.
He's seen plenty since because we've had some bad runs.
Okay.
Every speedrunning guild, I'm sure, goes through it where they'll have one of their best runs and then immediately followed up by just doing the most disgustingly horrible run of. Yeah, let's go from a. I know that Immortality, and I missed it this week, unfortunately. They had I believe they set the record in Encourage, and then immediately dropped a longer than 1 hour Blackwing Lair nuke.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's different, isn't it?
The classic of set a server record into wipe repeatedly on nothing for no reason.
Was it on lab packs? Was it on lab packs?
I have no idea. I was only in Naxxramas this week because I was on a vacation where I I was part of our next Ramus raid this week, but I was at a grand total of 1 FPS on most boss fights because I was on my Microsoft Surface.
Yeah.
And that's not exactly a gaming rig, let me tell you that much. But fortunately, I play Paladin, so you don't really need FPS to do that.
For the record, when a guild goes in over cocky to Blackwing Lair, it's not the lab packs that get you. It's a random DPS warrior pulling aggro on a Drake and
Oh, that's
really
fair.
deep
You
in
know,
the
that's
raid.
fair.
It's that.
Yeah.
It's Shadow Flame, bitches.
Quote, I was pumping.
The on my Goblin Fury Warrior, the few times that I did go into Onyxia, I was good about not pulling aggro. However, back on when Classic first launched, so WoW Classic first launched, I played an Orc Warrior, and my God, I did not. I was the worst when it came to threat, and I was the guild leader too, and people made crap of me constantly.
It's because you didn't have Blessing of Salvation.
No, we didn't.
That shit's OP, just saying.
Thanks, Ducky.
Alliance carried.
Yep.
Okay, moving on before I cry anymore internally. Let's go ahead and talk about what is to come. What is on the horizon. Obviously, we have Karazhan 40. We have Grimbatal coming. Akalix, if you could go ahead and tell us how those raids are going to change the raiding environment in your opinion, or let's say in actual mechanics in certain ways that you can talk about. How are things going to change, do you feel?
So obviously they're going to impact every other raid because you're going to have better gear, and that means you're going to be able to go a little bit faster. So eventually, I can foresee Molten Core, Blackwing Lair on Courage getting a little lower. Nax, I could honestly maybe after Grimbatal, maybe not until Grimbatal, but maybe even before then, I could foresee people pushing closer to the 1 hour mark on an Naxxramas. I think that that's really going to be starting to find the limit, but I think that that is something that could be pushed to. And then on a more casual side of things, I think that Kara 40 and Grimbatal are really going to be seen as like the apex contents about how Nax is currently, where there doesn't really have a lot of pugs running it, whereas you can find a random Molten Core pug pretty often. Just because they're going to require it's going to require you to pass the gear check of just having enough gear to clear the raids, and also require you to be aware of what you're doing. Like for example, there's going to be at least one hard gear check in Kara 40, where if you are not prepared for that boss, you do not have the correct gear that you need for it, you're not going to be able to clear that boss. And it's not something you're going to be able to consume your way through. It's just going to be a flat gear check. And there are some of those that exist in other raids. And if you are a guild who, is serious about raiding, you might be wanting to read into what I could possibly be hinting at here. But hint, hint, there's a gear check. You will need to pass it.
This sounds like Firemaw to a certain extent. At least how you're talking about it sounds like Firemaw.
Definitely is a gear check in there or two that I can say. But it's also going to be other things where you're going to need to have this and that and be doing a couple different things to really it's not going to be, these raids are not going to be for everyone to be able to clear. And if you are not you're somebody who doesn't pay attention in raids and you just show up to walk around and follow the group, maybe you're going to want to stick to some of the other ones. And in the future, there are going to be other more casual raids for people to do who are less hard end game progression minded, who just want to do more casual raiding, see more cool things, because we're not going to be done with making custom raids after Grimbatal. Grimbatal is definitely going to be our crown jewel for a while of the big end game thing. I wouldn't expect another end game raid that deep in progression for at least a year after Grimbatal comes out, because we currently don't have anything in our plans for a tier 5 or a tier 4.5. Eventually, obviously, we'll probably do that, but that's not going to be for a long time. What we do have plans for is other raids to fill in some of these other missing parts, where we'll have, let's say, a tier 2.5 raid that we add, or we add another tier 2 level raid, that sort of thing. Where there's a lot of places that we still have to add into the game that we want to explore raids in. There are places where there's a lot of content still left to be seen and done. There's the entirety of places like the Quel'Thalas, Eversong Waste, Zulaman that are going to be coming out later on, where maybe we're going to add in a smaller or less endgame raid there. Maybe we're going to add in a raid in Uldum, because there is a gate to Uldum on
Don't
Turtle
get me started on Uldum, because I'll talk all day about it.
And there is also Southern Silithus, where there's something there on the map, but it's not accessible in game, so maybe something happens there. And there's also 1,001 different islands. Maybe something's going to happen at one of those. There's no being, well, okay, there is for me, but there's no being certain for people who want to theorize about that. So there are many different directions that we could go with more casual raids in the future, not just going to be looking at the more competitive raids.
The possibilities alone for Uldum, I have been obsessed with Uldum since I saw those gates back in 2004. And I have this very clear idea of what is inside them that I have speculated on for ages. Anywho, one thing that you bring up is the non absolute end tier content that you've been talking about here. One thing I've noticed with almost all of the content that Turtle has put out that's custom has been outside of Lower Karazhan, it's been 40-man style content. Are there plans for any of these, not necessarily like lower tier per se content, but these other raid ideas? Could they be 20 mans? Could they be other 10 mans? Or is it always going to be 40 man?
It could be any of those. It could be 10 man, 20 man, 25 man, 33 man.
33 would be a really odd number. Please don't do that.
Don't worry, you're only gonna have to bench a couple people then.
I dislike
jokes
odd
aside,
numbers.
You can always find 5 to cut.
Jokes aside, we are going to be doing multiple different types of raids, different points in progression, all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be open to both casual and less casual in the future, where we're going to look to have some things more competitive, which we're going to be taking the more competitive side of it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also going to be trying to. We are still overall a server that has a lot of dad guilds, like I mentioned, where it's a lot of, me and the friends just hop on to do our Turtle WoW raid for 2 hours on the weekend, and then we're done. And we want to be able to allow people like that to have new fun experiences as well. And also do cool things on the competitive side, which, like, the race for server first for Karazhan 40 and especially Grim Batol, those are going to be really cool, and those are going to be very significant. I imagine a lot of guilds are going to be trying to push for that. Obviously, you're going to have the top contenders of the people who are pushing in Naxxramas right now, but I also do expect some people to come out of the woodwork to go, you know what? I really want to try to see if our guild can do this. Yeah, let's try to go for it.
How much would I have to beg for us to do some kind of official, like, Turtle WoW coverage of the race to Karazhan 40 first? For the
I
server?
would love to, and I will say that we do have some plans in place to help track that better. Because we do not expect that it's just going to be in the first hour or two of the raid being out that somebody clears it. We do expect that it's going to take a little bit of time for people to break through the wall.
Sure.
And one thing that we're planning on doing that we're trying to get implemented is we're going to be having not server-side logs, as much as I would love to be able to announce something like that, but what we're going to be doing is a server-side completion tracking on boss kills, which will be able to... The main goals would be to be able to have it be the first features that we're going to try to do in the system, which it's going to be complicated and a low priority development, but it's something that we are wanting to have added because I think it's a good quality of life, is a tool that could be used for doing speedrunning times easier than the logging currently offers, where it is upload it to a site and hopefully the site's completely correct on all that, whereas this will be able to do the timing officially. And what our main thing would be with this is going to be having a leaderboard for kills or for progression throughout Karazhan 40 and Grimbatol. So you'd be able to check on the leaderboard and you'd see, oh, this group is at this far in progression. Like you could go and you could say, oh, okay, we went to bed last night and Thunderail Brewing Co. and Mortality were number 1 and number 2. And wake up in the morning, and then now Hard Knocks and Doom Turtles are 2 bosses ahead because they woke up earlier on EU raid schedules and started pushing. Okay. We can see where everyone is in the progression, and that will mean that everyone can see who's where in progression. That's something that we want to have added in by then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100% guaranteed to be there, but it's something that we definitely want to do because we do want to have some official support for the more competitive side, where people are going to be trying to push for server first on things and trying to also do speedrunning, because we do want to as much as we would love to do a server-sided logging, it's extremely taxing, so it's not something we're likely going to be able to do, at least not now. Maybe in the future, if we had better client-side support for it, or if we had other various options for good ways to handle it without it just absolutely demolishing our servers. It would be something that we'd like to be able to offer as a better logging and all that sort of solution. But as of right now, our main focus is going to be getting there to be sort of a completion leaderboard there. And then that can make it so people can see who gets the server first on it. And then from there, maybe we'll be able to add on times for these completions. So we can have a more verifiable than logs, which can be edited, or verifiable than VODs, which means that people then have to show off their VODs of their strategies. It can be, okay, well, the server officially registered it as this time. Unless you hack the server, there's no real way to cheese that.
Doing some kind of limited race to world first kind of coverage for that kind of thing, I think would be so much fun. Not just for myself, because I eat that kind of thing up. I love it. But I think it'd be really rejuvenating for the community to be able to see all these different groups that they know and recognize being spotlit and competing at that kind of level. With that being said, though, Akalix just gave us so much information there all at once. So Ducky and Vrograg, I'm going to go to both of you here in a second. Ducky, first up, as a GM for a major guild competing for these kinds of things, with everything Akalix just gave us in regards to where raiding is going, how do you as a GM approach making sure your guild is ready for something like that?
You don't really change much. You kind of keep going what you're doing, because you're always recruiting, you're always expanding your roster, you're always training in new players, you're always gearing up. But there's also like something like that always brings back a lot of old players too. Like they hear about it or they get pinged about it. Because usually there's plenty of players who aren't currently active because they're busy or because it's summertime or because they've got kids who were just born. Or in my case, I got promoted to work and have a lot more work on my plate, so I don't play as much anymore. But it's just, yeah, you get an awful lot of people come back. And then the main difficulty is actually just trying to organize it. You want people you can rely on to do timers, to update add-ons, to add stuff to big wigs. You want people who you trust to be off tanks, to adjust. You have assigned healers that you can rely on, that kind of thing. You kind of go into it with, how to describe it? You know when you go with pugs and you kind of have a couple of people you rely on that will just change to whatever happens and call out people for
Oh
doing bad
yes.
things, and
Oh
you
yes.
you have contingency plans and you've backup. When you're speed running, you optimize for execution, and you don't do that. You don't plan to fail if you want a good fast run. You're planning for everything to go right, and then you practice till it always does. So there is a very different mindset in raid prep there as well for progression, which can take a little bit to adjust people to as well.
It
So that's the other
does.
aspect.
Does the fact that this is as a highest raid tier, this is going to be entirely new content. Like there's not going to be a source that you can look up previously known strategies for. Like Nax isn't a perfect copy on Turtle, but you can look up how things were done on Classic and Vanilla and say, okay, we have a basic blueprint to follow and to work off of. For Kara 40, you're going to be going in entirely unknowing as to what is there. Strategies have to be written down. Strategies have to be compiled. Is that going to change anything for you and for your guild?
It's a different mindset going in, but honestly, you can adjust to it pretty quick. Like you kind of just figure things out. It does depend on how the devs do balancing things. Like if you end up with an awful lot of fights that are more mechanical, say there's a Four Horsemen style fight where you need to sit down with a pen and paper and figure out some rotations. Sure, that can take some adjusting, and maybe it's one of those let's analyze the logs and come back tomorrow. But most things, like if it's just a straight gear check, then the check is going to be: are your healers good enough, or are your tanks tanky enough, or do you have enough DPS or whatever? That's always going to be pretty straightforward, and I would be pretty confident most of the top guilds will pass that. It could also be a quirk, is like balance on new stuff like this is a lot like haggling. You know, it's very easy start high and come down, but it's very hard to start low and go up, if you know what I mean. You know, if you start off the difficulty too low, you can't buff it later without everyone throwing a fit. So I think the inclination for most developers is to start with a higher difficulty, and then if it proves to be too difficult, you can adjust it down. There's also like, you know, scaling comes in eventually with the next rate, and that's a reduction, that's a nerf. So that can also be a fun aspect. But yeah, going in blind, it'll be fun. It's just a slightly different mindset.
Awesome. Now, Vrograg, same pros to you here. Akalix just gave us a whole heckin' lot of information. As someone who actively covers not just the raiding scene, but the community at large, how do you feel these additions to the raiding community, both at the top and spread throughout the different tiers, is going to affect what you do and how the community functions?
Well, I think it's going to change a whole host of things. Overall, I have no doubt in my mind that the community can rise to any occasion. We already have sort of a good template of what happens, because it's rare to see new content right on a vanilla server. And when Emerald Sanctum came out, a guildmate of mine helped found a separate Discord that was just for the sharing of information about Emerald Sanctum and Lower Karazhan. Top guilds were sharing information and strategies to make sure they had everything down. It was collaborative. So I think generally it's going to be a great moment for the community to have those discussions reach across the aisle. And in, a lot of cases, it's an international community. A lot of people will be reaching across the oceans and talking to each other, figuring this out. It's going to be a great moment. It generally is when it takes a server to do something, and it'll be, as far as I'm concerned, it's really the probably easiest news content I could ask for. Where it's just like, hey, so and so cleared this. It's like easy news, and I get to talk to some of the best people on the server when I get to cover that stuff. So I'm excited.
It is going to be a very exciting time, and again, I would love to organize some kind of, not like constantly live coverage, but interspersed live coverage of the race to a Karazhan 41st completion. It's not going to be in a few days. It's probably going to take a week or so from how Akalix has talked about it, but I think that would be fun. I think that would be a good time. Now, before we close up shop here, we do have some representatives from some different guilds here, as you might have been able to tell. And there might be, I'm not going to say animosity, but certainly you like to fling a little mud when you have the opportunity to do so. So, Akalix, I will let you go first here. Please, by all means, if you need to talk a little shit, now is the time to do so.
I mean, without talking too much shit, I'd give it a week or two before Mortality has the quad crown and has all 4 titles as #1 on the server. We're a little bit limited by the fact that we haven't been raiding for years on the server, but next Ramus overall, some of that gear difference can be made up for with certain smart skips and certain strategies. So I'm looking forward to, reigning from the throne.
Oh, okay. Very well. Ducky, your response.
Well, if you come at the queen, you best not miss. But no, you're doing good. I think you're a bunch of cowards for not showing your VODs. Just saying.
Ooh.
But that's a different thing. But no, you're doing good. You're improving. You're getting there steady. I think honestly, execution-wise, you're about on par. There's a slight gear cap, but we also have some strats and some adjustments we'll be making. I honestly have to laugh at the gap in Blackwing Lair because that just basically comes down to we got paladin calls and you didn't.
I wonder if you guys have theory crafted the same 22-minute Blackwing Lair that we have, where there's a theoretical 22-minute Blackwing Lair, but it just takes some of the most ridiculously stupid stuff to actually manage.
Yeah, there's a bit of RNG on the pathing and stuff like that. But yes.
So wait, you've gotten that speedrun, that theoretical 22-minute requires specific pathing?
Kind of, yeah. Because it's where the 2 drakes at the top, where is Firemaw when you get to them, stuff like that.
I couldn't imagine doing that in 22 minutes.
Both in Blackwing Lair and in Ancrage, the top runs both need good pathing and then everything else to go correctly.
Yep. And that's what you plan for. That's how you do speedruns.
It's a lot like real speedrunning in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that too. I really love that. For the VOD, I'm gonna say strike. I'm gonna give the crown to Ducky on that one. Sorry, Akalix.
It's gonna change in the next patch anyway, and it's for that.
It's okay. We don't need that crown. We'll just take the crown in every single time category.
All right, quick closing thoughts, Vrograg. Any quick closing thoughts here? And plugs.
As always, I'll plug my new show, which will be broadcasted on Everlook Radio. You can be listening for top news, market watch, community corner, as well as changelog notes. You can always catch me on my YouTube at Vrograg Fishlayer. The only notes I have about speedrunning is I feel like you're all just a bunch of dirty cheaters, and if I had my way, I would make Potion of Invisibility skips illegal, and then you guys would all cry.
I would be very happy with invis skips being illegal, personally. I think they're not fun. Just because
I'd be happy with that, just because it's so often that there's just one idiot that will wipe the raid on an invis skip.
Yep, and relogging to do cooldown. It's just boring. I'd rather Zug brute force through all the content and be the fastest doing it that way. But if there's a faster strategy available, you have to do it. So yeah.
There
I'd
it
be happy with
is.
invis beans. I would happily vote for that.
Akalix, any last thoughts or plugs that you want to do for either Turtle or yourself?
For Turtle, the content creator contest will have just recently wrapped up when this goes live. So congrats to the winners, and everybody, please take a good look if you are interested in creating content for Turtle at our content creator partner program stuff. Please reach out to me if you're interested in getting involved with that, and you have done content creation in the past, or you're looking to get into content creation for the server. I love to see that sort of content, and I've been very happy with the entries that we have had for it thus far. So if you are interested in that, take a gander at it. On a personal side, shout out to Mortality for carrying me through 4 different raids every week. That's pretty chill. I am a Paladin player, and I am horrible at the game, so that's pretty chill. And another small shout out to Skeleton and Mbappe Speedhack, because the fact that there are Telebeam guilds on the leaderboard for Blackwing Lair and Molten Core when they only had Blackwing Lair and Molten Core gear is pretty impressive, to say the least. So,
And
big shout
Cthulhu
outs
has
to
been
them.
killed recently too.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how much they can improve their times there. If they could start, knocking at the door of the top 3 on some of them, that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, I hope they do as well. That will be fun.
Random side note, but I never got the Mbappe speed hack reference, and now I actually, because I have learned slightly more about soccer, football, I now get the reference. My apologies, I am uncultured. Ducky, closing thoughts and any shout outs for you.
I'm looking forward to new raids. I look forward to retaking the crown for Doom Turtles and everything. And shout out to everyone in my guilds, particularly my officer team. I mean, I know I get to be the face, being the raid lead, knowing I'm voicing the VODs, but honestly, they do all the background work. Every 90-minute run of Naxxramas involves about 4 hours of admin work beforehand and prep. So shout out to those guys. They are legends. Shout out to the guildies. And anyone who wants to join, you can hit up Ducky in game. We're in open coalition. We specifically do not require us to join the guild. Everyone is welcome. And you can probably find us on the Turtle WoW Discord as well with Guild Out.
And that is it for a look under the shell. We look forward to the next episode where hopefully we're going to have a member of the Turtle leadership team on with us to talk about 117.2. And hopefully by then we will have a little bit better of an idea of when that release date may be coming. No promises, of course, but that is our hopes and dreams here. I've been Dan, and thank you for joining us for another Look Under the Shell. We'll see you next time.